Good afternoon, and welcome to the Voice of Wisdom. With over 60 years of experience as an investment banker, entrepreneur, investment analyst, economist, and venture capitalist, Morty Davis is Wall Street and capitalism personified. The over 400 companies for which he has raised more than $3 billion over the years have created a countless number of jobs and exciting new products. Through the Voice of Wisdom, Mr. Davis explores, analyzes, and debates the most topical political, economic, and social issues facing our world today. Joining Mr. Davis today for a discussion on how we can maintain an impartial judiciary system in such a highly polarized America is Len Carter. Len is an investment banker, business consultant, and private investor. And now, Mr. Davis and Mr. Carter.
Welcome back. It's Wednesday, the evening, 6:30, and yours and mine, yours being the listeners that share this program, this hour with me, and my own. It's so inspiring for me to have you all reach out to me, give me your criticisms, your positive ideas, your insights. You're fantastic, and I really appreciate it. Even though at some instances, initially I get a little angry. I say, what doesn't he or she understand? But each time a criticism helps me think about the validity of my own ideas, or should I modify them, or does it reinforce my thinking? But anyway, you're very brilliant. I'm the voice of wisdom, but you are the voices of wisdom. So thank you for joining me every Wednesday at 6:30 for an hour. I wish I had more time to spend with you all, but my time is limited, especially at my age. At my age, I don't even buy green bananas anymore. Anyway, before I get into the nitty-gritty of the events that we're going to talk about today, which are always not only humbling, but depressing and can leave you in a sour mood, because what's going on in the world almost regularly, with few resting periods or times when there isn't bad news. Every time you turn on the television, there's some terrible news. As a matter of fact, the only news that's carried is bad news. No media announces Len just received straight A's and won the not the Nobel Prize, but the prize in his school,
Booby Prize,
valedictorian, and highest student rating. That's never news. That never makes the front page. Even donations of 50 million or 100 million to schools often rarely make the front page. So what makes the news is the only way you could be sure, if you commit murder, you only get the front page, even if you commit 5 murders or 10 murders. The only way you could be sure of getting on the front page of the Times is if you're a serial killer, and even a serial killer rarely gets on because there's lots of serial killers in this country over the years. But a serial killer who eats his victims. What was the name of the guy that ate his victims? They found his victims in a freezer. So anyway, before I get off on the subjects that we're going to discuss that often depress me, and are likely to change your mood for the worse rather than the better. But intellectually, it should be entertaining, even inspiring, and add to your total knowledge, and be useful. So and help you to think about things in our society, in our country, in our world. So before we launch into that, I want to tell you about my book, Happiness Guaranteed. This book here, or Your Misery Back: How to Be Happy No Matter What. It's really so popular that I looked it up on the internet, and somebody is using the same title. It starts with the preface choice: Happiness Guaranteed or Your Misery Back. Now, you know he didn't come up with that till I published my book. But anyway, I guess that's the highest form of flattery, when somebody takes what your knowledge is and repeats it, or takes your art and tries to duplicate it. So I'm flattered that he, but it's really perjury, because he's trying to sell a book on the basis of the title of my book. And so this book is guaranteed to make you happy. How do I know that? Because people call me up all the time. I never got one return of the book, even though I give the best deal anybody ever heard. The good drug companies, the good products promise that if you don't like it, send it back to us, send your purchase the slip back to us, and we'll refund you money, which is pretty good. And they even let you keep the product in most cases. In my case, I say not only will I return your money, I'll give you back double what you paid for the book, and you can keep the book. So I don't know how you can have a better deal than that. And so far, nobody's ever taken me up on that. They've all, not all, but everybody I heard from has praised me, has thanked me, because it's every page. It's one page for every day of the book, 365 pages. The only danger is, because of the 365 pages, I might get sued by somebody, because they got to earn you from carrying it around. But otherwise, it's really worth your while. Get a copy, and as I say, if you're not totally happy with it, call me or send me a note or something, and send me a purchase slip, and I'll send you back double what you paid. Anyway, so before I get into it, I'd like to start off by giving you some advice, a little few words on how to be happier. And it has nothing to do with getting rich or getting more money. I have to tell you, I knew two very wealthy guys. They were in the Forbes 400 wealthiest Americans at the time. And one of them was the chairman and a major shareholder of Grand Central Railroad. Used to be a big stock on the stock exchange. Now I don't know if it's been merged into another company. That and Pennsylvania Railroad used to trade on the New York Stock Exchange. So the chairman was highly regarded, very rich. On one Friday afternoon, they showed him with a picture at his pool table. He had a pool table in his living room. And I guess he was overwhelmed by some concern or something that was going on in his life. And he pulled out a gun and shot a bullet through his head. This is from one of the wealthiest men in America, who had a yacht, a private plane. I don't know what else you could have. and he blew his own brains out. And the second one was there's a very prosperous gentleman now, big Wall Street private equity investor and holder. His name is Leon Black. Leon Black. His father was, what was his father's name?
Eli.
Eli Black, right. Eli Black. And Eli Black was formerly a rabbi, then he joined Lehman Brothers. He became a top broker at Lehman Brothers. Then he started to invest his money in private car companies. He was probably one of the first private equity investors and made a fortune. And he became, in due course, he became chairman of the largest vegetable, fruit, and fruit company in the world. It was called the United Fruit, listed on the New York Stock Exchange. And clearly he was very, very wealthy. Said that he didn't stay around because he would have gotten a lot of pride and joy to see how well his son has developed and is doing. But he was worried that there was some law passed that if you bribed foreigners to get business, which was a common practice throughout the world in those days, the only way you could get a contract with Middle East countries, Muslim countries, Arab countries, and even European countries. So they passed a law in this country, if you pay a bribe, even though you could call it a commission or whatever, to the buyer, the United States companies, as a result of that, started to lose an enormous amount of foreign trade business for their products. And the rest of the world was very happy that the United States passed that bill because it led to more income for them, more revenues for them. But interestingly, he was concerned that he had violated that law and he was going to be nationally embarrassed throughout the country and throughout the world, and would wind up in jail because of what he did under the law. You could be incarcerated. So he went up to the 42nd floor of the Pan Am building. That's on 42nd Street in Manhattan. And he took his attaché case with him. I guess he wanted to have take his work with him. He jumped out of the 42nd floor window and killed himself. All because he was worried about some event that was likely to occur, at least in his mind, was sure to occur in the future, and he didn't want to face up to that. So what I want to tell you is, on any given day, don't be overwhelmed by something you visualize that is happening or is going to happen in the future. Just relax. With the passage of time, if what's his name, if Leon Black just hung around and really waited, he would have known, become aware that nobody was prosecuted under that law. I think there was one prince of one European country that took a lot of bribes for military equipment from the United States, and he wound up in jail for that. So, and there were others, but nobody as famous as Leon Black or this prince. So, if you become overwhelmed, just don't think about it anymore. With the passage of time, it'll become less important and likely disappear from your life. And even if the worst thing happens, There's nothing more valuable than life. So cling to it with everything that you can. Even people that survived the Holocaust, I've known some of them that went on to live wonderful lives, developed new families. I knew one rabbi that came to the States. He lost his wife and 12 children to the Holocaust. And he came to the States and he remarried and had more children and wrote a lot of brilliant music. His name was the Klausenberger Rabbi. I guess Klausenberg was a city in Europe somewhere, Poland or Hungary. So even if the worst thing happens, I met a gentleman who was president of a company on the New York Stock Exchange, and he was devastated because he was found to have done some wrong, and he got, I think, a 5-year sentence. And he, in anticipation, he said he was suicidal, he was so depressed. When he came out, 5 years later, he stopped off at my office. He was so suntanned and looked so good. He lost weight and everything. I said, where the hell were you? Were you in Miami? Were you in Acapulco? Where were you? You look so good. He said, no, they put me in a place in Florida, and I was outdoors almost every day. They had tennis courts, they had basketball courts. If I knew how good it was, I wouldn't have resisted arrest. So even the worst things can turn out to be good. You can make good contacts through the relationships you develop, especially if you're a mafioso. You could get a lot of connections. But don't give in to that. There's a famous saying, don't bite off more than you can chew. And that's what gets you crazy. If you think that it's so overwhelming, you can't see your way out of it. It's eating you up. It takes only a few minutes to grab a gun or grab some poison and end your life, and you think that's a solution. And it may be a solution, but it's not a good one. So all I could do is advise you, as I do every week, to switch your gears, change your thinking. You're in control of your mind. Think about only good things. I told you, when I get depressed like that, my solution is I run down to my freezer downstairs in the kitchen. I take a pint of chocolate, Haagen-Dazs, put it in a bowl. I think it's a special ice cream bowl. I put on a tab of chocolate syrup, a bunch of whipped cream, and some chopped nuts, and even a cherry. What do you call those cherries?
Maraschino cherries.
Maraschino cherry. And my mood changes instantly, just preparing it and looking at it. So you might not have the same attitude towards an ice cream sundae as I do, but watch a good movie, read a book, visit a close friend and chat with them. And usually a good friend, if he's really a good friend and bright, will know how to cheer you up without saying, don't worry about it, this will pass and everything. He'll know the right thing to say. He'll remind you about things that we're going to do in the future that are very uplifting. Like remember, even though say he just lost somebody very close to him, somebody close to him passed away. He's in a terrible mood and there's nothing you could say. But you can remind him that, we still have that date to go skiing in Vermont in December. And I'm sure by then you will be on your way, not to overcoming this, because you probably have a scar the rest of your life, but you will respond to it positively, do good things related to that, as many people do. People lose a child. Some people wind up in mental institutions. Mothers that lose a child at a young age through an accident or disease could wind up in a mental institution. The father winds up an alcoholic. It can destroy their lives. And other people, they're equally devastated and hurt by the tragedy. But they go on to do things in memory of that child. They raise funds for cancer cure, for example, because their son had died from cancer. Or they deal with getting rid of guns within the population, access to guns, because their kid was shot in school by some madman. So you can make a positive out of a negative, and every year they have a party celebrating their son's passing and raising funds for good things and feeling good about it and remembering their son fondly. So do good things, do things that make you happy. And now, to make you miserable, we're going to continue this. So what do you want to talk about? I'm glad to have my brilliant Len Carter back. I keep inviting him back because he is so brilliant. I mentioned to you in the past that he's a genius. He graduated.
Just in case you forgot.
In case you forgot. He graduated at the top of his class at the same school that I graduated from, Harvard Business School. Like me, he graduated with distinction. And then he went on to get a master's degree in engineering at one of the great Ivy League schools, Cornell. And after that, before he came to Harvard Business School, he went to Stanford, another great school on the West Coast, one of the great business schools as well. But he went in to Stanford to do graduate work, master's, or I don't know, was it a doctor's or a master's?
Just master's.
In engineering. What was it?
Master's degree.
Master's degree in engineering. He is a master. And so it's a pleasure to have him on once again.
Thank you.
He often aggravates me because he disagrees with me and we fight it. Afterwards, you should see the black eye I come out with. He's younger than me and stronger than me. I could laugh at it, but it's not funny. Anyway, Len, what do you want to discuss this week?
So, one of the things that as a democracy we pride ourselves on, I think, is the idea of the rule of law and the idea that everyone is subject to the rules that govern us all, and that in making that a reality, you need to have an impartial, truly impartial system of judges, of selecting juries, of prosecutors, of all the elements that go into the judicial system. You need to have a way and systems just and to ensure that there's impartiality. Because if you don't have impartiality, then you don't have a justice system. And if you don't have the rule of law applying to everyone, then it's like a kingdom where the king is just immune to things. So I think those issues which, in the last, prior to the last 8 years, before we had a new type of president in 2016, I think a lot of that was taken for granted. People just assumed that if someone were being prosecuted for a crime, that it was a legitimate prosecution. People assumed that jury selection would be done in a fair manner, and that the jurors selected to try to opine on a case would be impartial, truly impartial, and would be able to put their feelings aside. I mean, everyone has opinions, so you can have an opinion, but not let that opinion affect how you.
People even have stronger than opinions.
Right.
They have convictions.
Yes.
They feel strongly.
But if you're, the real test to a democracy is whether or not people can put their convictions aside and judge based on evidence and law and facts. So with that in mind, we've seen a few interesting examples of where the judicial system may have gotten off kilter in terms of impartiality, with the most headlined one being the recent Trump case, hush money case brought by the DA in New York City for falsifying business records to cover up hush money payments and then to interfere with the election. So if you just look at why this is a problem, is that 76% of Republicans said that the hush money trial was rigged.
What percentage?
76 of Republicans. Republicans, 58% strongly disagree with the verdict. 17% somewhat disagree. So that's a very high.
With the guilty verdict.
Right. And, I can't imagine that everyone polled was versed in all the facts and real evidence of the case, because a lot of these cases involve somewhat esoteric law. And while, in this case, it's not illegal to make a hush money payment, but if you're falsifying business records to do that, then it becomes a problem. So, and then if you look at what the Democrats, their views are, substantially the opposite, where a small percentage of them believe it was rigged and agree or disagree with the verdict. So, I guess the first thing we just, as a big question, why do you think this is happening today versus years ago? And if you look, and why does it seem to be so indicative of Republicans? You don't see the Democrats crying out on the Bob Menendez case, where he's being on trial now for corruption, taking bribes from Mideastern gold bars in his closet, where the Democrats don't cry out because he's being.
Well, they're crying out about Hunter Biden,
but not.
I think it's unfair.
I mean, it's interesting
that they're trying to beat up on President Biden through his son.
Yes, but also in the same way, the big question of the Trump trial, was that a political prosecution? I'll just throw that. What do you think?
None of you have been watching television or listening to radio or been on the internet, social, they're not stations.
Social media.
Social media. If you didn't hear the president, every senator, almost congressman, almost every politician say repeatedly this year, the great thing about America is we're all equal under the law, whether you're white, black, African American, Asian, tall, short, and so they think that's one of the hallmarks that makes this country so great. Although Trump so far has, at least up to this last decision, has been able to avoid any prosecution, not even by Congress of what's it called? When he was not
When he was president, the impeachment process?
impeached. Not even they couldn't even carry out an impeachment against what they considered major violations because the Senate wouldn't
convict. They impeached him but didn't convict him.
So the question is, are we truly all equal under the law? I don't know. The ones that have the very wealthy who have top lawyers and all kind of, just as Trump got away over the years with many bankruptcies, with the phony school that people paid high tuitions and never got any results, any payback for their tuitions. He took money out of his foundation, charitable foundation, and used it for personal needs. So he never got convicted because he had Ray Cohn, one of the most aggressive lawyers. He worked for Joe McCarthy. Most of you listening don't know of Joe McCarthy, but he was a senator. I think it was a senator. Was it a senator or congressman? But Joe McCarthy, anyway, was very powerful, anti-communist for a brief period, and he abused so many people, ruined their careers, ruined their lives by calling them communists and causing them to lose their jobs. Many people in Hollywood couldn't get assignments.
Just making an implication, not even, even if you were vindicated, like Oppenheimer. Oppenheimer was ruined because they said he had a girlfriend who was a communist, or he had a friend, and then years after he died, he was exonerated.
It was a terrible time because they really, Joe McCarthy, and Roy Cohn was his assistant, really abused good people, generals and admirals and guys who served in the Second World War and risked their lives and came back wounded. He was an equal opportunity abuser, just about anybody. And finally one day, I think there was a lawyer called Welch or something, and he got up and said to Joe McCarthy something like, "Have you no conscience? Have you no?" Very touching, just one or two sentences, and it hit home with everybody because he didn't. He ruined lives without being concerned, without evidence that they were communists or bad. And not only that, he didn't realize that during the Second World War, we had in this area that I live in now. In those days, I couldn't even afford to visit this area. It was such a wealthy area. But my father sold salami, bologna, hot dogs, and corned beef and whatever to the local supermarkets, appetizing stores, hotels, etc., that were in this market and over the bridge in Long Beach and Atlantic Beach. So I got to see. And right on the main street was Bundles for Russia. We were supporting Russia because they were our number one ally. They kept us from getting slaughtered by Hitler and the Germans. I remember there was a company, not a company, a program. In those days, we don't have like today instant feedback. The news that you got was a week late, a week before. There was you saw news in a movie. There was a newsy reel. So I was listening regularly every night, and we didn't have all day news. It was on from 9 to 9:30 on WOR in New York. And he was saying if only the Russians can hold out for another 4 weeks, they can only hold out for another 25 days. We were rooting for the Russians so much to defeat the Germans, and ultimately they did, because Napoleon's career ended, or success ended in Russia, and Hitler's did, because they have very cold winters and you can't supply your troops with what they need because the roads are all closed, the railroad. So Joe McCarthy didn't even realize that we were strong supporters of Russia, and we even had people run for president in this country under the label communist. There was one guy that ran many times under communist, another one ran under socialist. So, but he found a cause celeb, and he became famous. But he was really ruthless. I mean, there's a role to play. There was a Senator Kefauver who had a committee against mafia and criminals and so forth, a congressional committee. And he did such a good job, and it was targeted against people that were really bad. And as a result of his heading that committee, he became a Democratic candidate for president subsequently. So,
but here's the thing in terms of political prosecution. I think the big argument that people make in supporting the case that it is politically motivated is, is this a typically prosecuted offense? And in the case of Trump, falsifying business records is rarely prosecuted. In the case of Hunter Biden, his case is about not disclosing that he was on drugs when he bought a gun, applied for a permit. So
he lied.
Right. And that's, again, not prosecuted. Right. So are these political prosecutions? They very well may be because of that. Just prosecutors do have discretion. The question is, how wrong is it? Because if a crime's committed, then I think it wasn't a
falsification of records.
And then it was turning it into a felony. Falsification's a misdemeanor. He turned it into a felony by...
He was found guilty of the same crime that his lawyer went to jail for. And that is, he made payments that he hadn't made for a couple of years. But just before the 2016 election, a day after he made that stupid remark on Access
Hollywood,
where he said to the host, I could walk up to any woman, reach under her dress, and grab her whatever, and they don't take issue with it. In fact, they like it. So that was already a scandal that people thought he has to drop out. And then if added to that, they found out he was paying off a porn star who who had slept with 100 different men in her movies, and another woman who we had a 9-month affair with while his wife was in the hospital having his last child. But the crime that seemed to be the one that nailed him the worst was the one that Michael, that his lawyer, Michael Cohen, went to jail for, and literally ruined his life.
But I mean, think of this: it's, if you're driving your car on the highway and everyone's going 80 miles an hour, and you get pulled over for speeding, and the policeman says, "I'm giving you a ticket because the speed limit's 55 and you were going 80." If you say to the policeman, "Well, but everyone's going 80," and the response back will be, "Yeah, but I didn't pull over everyone, I pulled over you." So, it's almost like Russian roulette. If you want to take a chance, falsifying business records is maybe not generally prosecuted, but it is a crime. Lying about your application for a gun.
On the magnitude.
Lying about your application of drug addiction for a gun permit may not be normally prosecuted, but it is a crime. So it's like, if you're going to commit a crime, then you're going to take the chance that maybe you're the one who gets pulled over for speeding, even though everyone else on the highway is not. And Alvin Bragg does have discretion and has been accused of being, unfairly prosecuting. If you look at this case that was stemming from 2021. In 2021, there was an assault. Joseph Borgen was leading a pro-Israel rally, and he was violently attacked by a 24-year-old named Wassim Awande, and he was prosecuted by Bragg, but got off what was pretty light, 18 months for a hate crime, a violent hate crime.
Well, if you beat up a Jew, a lot of people hold that's not a crime.
Well, I mean, certainly Bragg didn't, and then Awande said, "If I could do it again, I would."
He said that.
Yes. So, I mean, I think all that taken into account, to get an 18-month sentence, is that a fair prosecution, or is that biased?
Hamas and the Palestinians, which are overwhelmingly the population in Gaza, and 80% of them thought what happened on October 7th, the heinous behavior, the torture, the rape, the cutting off of babies' heads. It's unbelievable. And they say the same thing. They would do it again. It was a good thing. So we live in a crazy world. Human beings are the problem.
So what do you do? I mean, when you have how can politicians ever be put on trial?
All politicians have the same answer. Everybody does it. Everybody does it. So say the guy that's doing 80.
Yeah, but that's not an answer, because then it's the.
I agree with you, but their attitude is, "Why are you picking on me?" Every politician does it, and they're almost right. Almost every politician, when they look into them, for some reason they're corrupt. Look at Giuliani. He was the biggest hero. He was the
America's mayor.
America's mayor, because he behaved well on 9/11.
Yeah, and he cleaned up organized crime a lot.
Yeah. So, and he took care of minor crimes, which he said eliminated major crimes. He arrested people for spitting on the subway or
Quality of life crimes, yeah. But it's like a baseball game. There's always going to be a winning team and a losing team. So whenever someone's on trial,
not always.
What? There's a draw?
Yeah.
They just played. They play till there's a winner.
There's games that end in a permanent draw.
A baseball? When did a baseball?
What? It gets to the 14th inning and they're not involved in a major race. It's near the end of the season. They just
stop?
Yeah.
I thought they play till there's even they'll play to a winner.
In a lot of sports.
But in
hockey, it could end in
but in the case of a trial, you're always going to have one side that likes the outcome and the other side who cries foul, or doesn't like the outcome and therefore cries foul.
Yeah.
And I think that's where we've gotten to, is that it seems like this respect for the judicial system has disappeared. It's like just because you lose, and it's like with elections too.
That's very bad because it's undermining the respect we have for our law.
Right, because sometimes you lose, and sometimes, like they say, regardless of this upcoming 2024 election, Trump will not concede defeat. If he no matter what, either he's going to say he won.
He knows he won.
So if the media and the Electoral College says he won, he will agree with it, and if they don't, he will disagree with it. So it's like
he was honest in the debate with Hillary in 2015. The interviewer asked him, "Would you agree to
accept the outcome of the election?"
Yeah, and he said, "Of course I would, as long as I'm the winner."
Yep.
And he's kept to that word. And even now he says, they asked him and Tim Johnson, who's the only black senator, who's possible. Scott. Was he from South Carolina?
Yes.
So he's the strong possibility for choice for Trump's vice president. They asked him, an interview asked him if would you support whoever wins, and he says, "Of course I'll support."
Because I know he's going to win.
Because I know, so I don't want to deal with hypotheticals. I know Trump is going to win, and of course I'll support him. So that's a mindset that very powerful. It's like a cult. It's like a religion. Well, who was that guy that he took him to an island? He had all the married guys send their wives to him because he said it was God's wish. God's wish that he should.
His wish.
Of course. He got the message from God.
Yeah. Maybe that's what he meant.
And then ultimately he tells him to drink.
He wasn't lying.
What was it, Kool-Aid or something? I think Kool-Aid.
Well, it was some poison, but yeah.
Kool-Aid. No, there wasn't poison. There was some poison that was added to it or separate from it. But they all died, a lot of them. And it was a cult, So Trump's got a cult. It doesn't matter what he does. As a matter of fact, that's the danger that we could have, like we did at January 6th, a terrible, even more violent than because he puts like a mark on all the jurors, all the the judge, everybody. As a matter of fact, it's interesting. Instead of apologizing or conceding, he doubles down.
It's never contrition.
No, he doubles down. He says when he gets elected, there's going to be revenge.
Yep, retribution.
Retribution. He's going to let out all the people. There's over 1,000 people that are in jail because of January 6th. He said they didn't do anything wrong. They were just tourists.
Peaceful protesters.
He's confused between the tourist and terrorist. It's easy to be confused. That sounds like it. So I'm saying, he says he's letting all of those out, and the ones that put him in there are going to be jailed. You know, it's very fair that way. He's replacing the jail inhabitants.
So I don't know. I mean, what do you do? I mean, what do you do if you're a blue state? You know, how do you avoid the perception of political prosecution of Republicans? If you're a red state, how do you avoid the perception of
blue state is a Democrat?
You know, how do you do that?
Votes Democratic and red state is
you know, I think
state there, and the ones that aren't clear are called purple states.
So, you know, maybe there is no answer because it's the fragility of a democracy. They always talk about how fragile democracies are, and that's something
it hasn't been up to now.
I'm saying, but that's something for granted, right? Right. We've never really seen how fragile it really could be, and a lot of what's happening now, I think, highlights that fragility. Because
there's no question that Trump admires total control. He says the president should not be subject to any prosecution. He says the president could do anything he wants and has to be allowed to do that because otherwise he can't carry on his business. He's always going to be worried that something he does is going to come back to haunt him. So for 250 years, presidents have been working under the rule that you've got to behave. And except for Nixon, who was ultimately forced to resign, and if he didn't, it seemed like he was going to get thrown out or worse.
Yeah, he would have been impeached and convicted.
And maybe in jail.
Yeah, because the Republicans told him, we're not going to support you.
Yeah.
And so once he heard that, he left.
He didn't have the same
support that Trump, right?
Trump had.
Right.
Well, I don't know if you play bridge. Do you play bridge? In bridge, Trump is the strongest card. Before that, ace of spades is strongest. But if you have a trump card, even a 2 or 3 or 4, it's more important than an ace of spades. So Trump's got it. Very few people realize that his family name before they changed it, they came from Germany, his grandfather, and his name was
Trump.
How did they call it? Trump or something.
With a D.
What?
With a D, Trump or something.
Yeah, they're very, very not Anglo-Saxon, very. But I'll tell you, I'm going to miss Trump if he loses, because he's been the most entertaining. Every day I get up, you think there's nothing more he could do that would put him on the news, and every day.
Well, just because he loses, he may not go away. I mean, just like he lost in 2020, he didn't go away. He'll run again in 2032, 2028.
There's always a new story. There's always a new girl. There's always a new, it says he didn't want to hurt, some people theorize, he didn't want to hurt Melania. So that's why he paid off. Melania didn't even come to, most often, when the husband is under this kind of legal pressure and the case, the wife and family is sitting all around him. None of his kids even. One kid came.
Yep. Till the end. Yep.
One kid came one day.
Yep.
And another kid one day.
Yep. So we have a few minutes left. So let's just talk about the highest court and how what should be the most politically agnostic in the land is not so neutral. I mean, we saw
there should be the role model. There should be the highest.
Yes. Samuel Alito a couple of years ago flew an upside down American flag to symbolize support for
upside down.
Stop the Steal. And then I don't know if it was last summer at his beach house, he flew an appeal to heaven flag, which is allegedly symbolizes Christian nationalism, and also that the 2020 election was stolen. So he blames it on his wife, saying she, is in charge of the flagpole, which is a nice try, but and then refuses to recuse himself on any case that involves presidential immunity or anything else.
Or even
that's wrong.
Right.
But there hasn't been any, there should be congressional hearings, investigation. The president, I think Congress can force him to recuse himself. I mean, there's a lot more that could be done. I think Biden is standing by kind of quietly. The Congress is kind of quiet. It's like they're not really doing as much as they could. It's not just a case where he can do whatever he wants.
They don't want to politicize.
And he does?
Something as holy as we look up to.
Okay, but he did.
Court, I'm saying, but they're reluctant to do it. But in my book, they're saying they should have him recuse himself. To me, I think that's an act of traitor. You take the American flag when you're a role model, the highest court. You can't even be fired on that job. It's a lifetime job.
Well, you can be impeached like a president, but it's a process.
Yeah. Well,
so there is a mechanism for removal. I don't think I don't think a Supreme Court judge has ever been removed, and I don't know if they've ever been impeached.
Thomas and Alito are two justices appointed by the Republicans, and Thomas was accused by, I forgot what her name was, by his assistant of
Anita Hill,
right.
For harassment and assault.
Yeah, harassment, sexual harassment.
Yep.
And Biden was head of that selection committee, and despite the fact that she felt strongly and testified well, Biden said to let her go through, let him be. And then, instead of waiting 2 days or something, see what else occurred, a bunch of other women came forth and said Thomas was abusive to them, harassed them, and so forth. So Biden is responsible for letting him go through. It's not as if there's nobody else in the country or in the world that couldn't be a Supreme Court judge. And even if he denies him, he could bring him up again next time after he does all the research. But he wanted to recuse himself, even though his wife, Thomas's wife, was campaigning for Trump, saying that what's the sign they walk around with? stop the steal, that this election was stolen. And this very issue comes up before the Supreme Court. And he says, well, he doesn't talk to his wife. His wife doesn't talk to him about things, which is bull. It's very close to his wife. And he's taken tons of gifts and perks from very wealthy entrepreneurs and businessmen, and who have cases before the Supreme Court. He never recused himself. So it's outrageous. The only judges in the whole United States that don't have an ethical guideline under which you could attack them or
Code of ethics,
or get a code of ethics. Right?
Yep.
They have a code of unethics. So
how do we change that? How do we change that? Term limits? Have the American people vote on justices like we vote for congressmen, instead of having it nominated by the president and confirmed by the Senate? How do you change that?
Sure
how do you change the check and balance?
It works, but one senator or congressman proposed having much shorter terms so that every president would get a chance to appoint one or two Supreme Court justices. Mm-hmm. Right now it's all partisan.
Yep.
So if the Republicans are coming, you got one set of...
And it's just nobody resigns unless they're they do.
Nobody recuses themselves. Forget about resign.
No, but I'm saying the only way to have, even if you had shorter terms, if someone dies, then I guess you could just have a vacancy till the next president. And what happens if every president, if you have a string of Democrats, then how do you allow for conservative judges on the bench?
Either way, it's wrong. Or it should be maybe like they do on the other agencies. The Fed has that it has to be an equal number of Democrats and Republicans. Maybe it could.
Except
exceed by one.
But except what happens? What is a Republican? What is a Democrat? Why can't you have three parties? Or why? What constitutes? Why
have too many parties? They'll never get the work done.
No, that's what they do. So I don't know. I mean, and then if you just have a direct election, then that would reflect.
It doesn't. You could have. I think there's been people appointed that weren't related to any party. That somebody with a great national reputation.
Okay, but then, so what's you have a certain number of conservatives. You have a certain number of slots on the court for three slots for conservatives, three slots for liberals, and then other slots for none of the above. How do you have a balance when?
How do they do it on the Fed? How do they do it on a lot of agencies?
I don't know.
They have equal number with one. Whoever's in power gets the edge, gets the. So it's at least close. If there's a will, there's a way, and certainly with the way it is now.
Yeah.
Look at how wrong it was that Garland was appointed by Obama, with almost a year left in his term, and Mitch McConnell wouldn't bring him up for a vote. Forget about rejecting him. He said, well, there's an election coming up. Why don't we wait?
Let the American people decide.
Yeah, which never happened before.
Yeah.
And then a couple of years later, when Ginsburg passed away, there was only...
record time they did it.
Yeah.
But, if you allow the idea that justices were lifetime appointments was because they wanted to.
Because they used to only live till about 45.
Yeah, and they wanted, there was the thought was that if you're a lifetime appointment, you don't have to pander to anyone to get
That was a good
appointed
thought,
and reelected.
but they didn't realize
They
that
didn't,
our
right.
system is based on contributions. I call it bribery, because these wealthy guys buy off the congressman. So even though 70% of the nation is in favor of some form of gun control, the NRA is so powerful, gives so much money to support congressmen and senators who make the decision that it never gets passed. Even though 70%, you think 70% in a democracy, it would carry, and it doesn't. And that's not only with respect to gun control.
The only thing they carry is a concealed weapon. A carry permit.
Yeah.
Anyway,
it shows you the power of the money.
Yep.
Especially the Republican Supreme Court passed Citizens United or something, where it said corporations could give as much money as they want. That corporations are like human beings. So they make it worse instead of better. I mean, Bernie Sanders' approach is it should all be publicly funded. I don't know how that would ever work. Because who would you give the money if 100 guys line up and want to be president? Who do you fund? Everybody? That couldn't work, could it?
Yeah, I don't know how. You have more of an open. I mean, it's an interesting thought, because then you don't have just two parties bringing in established.
Better than that, you don't have what I call bribery, because they're bribed. Like when a bill comes up, say, and a congressman has to vote. Do you think he's taking a survey of what the people want, or he calls the guy who gave him the most money, helped him get elected, and says, "How should I vote on this bill?" He's not even considering, the validity of the arguments for or against it. He's bought off, it's essential because he wants to get the minute the congressman in the House of Representatives, particularly,
get elected, their goal is to get reelected.
They're 2 years. It's only 2 years, so they're starting to raise money for the next election. 2 years is a very short time. At least the Senate is 6 years.
Okay, well,
there's no perfect system when you're dealing with human beings.
That is true.
And we become less perfect with time instead of more perfect.
All we can do is try to chip away at it weekly for an hour.
Kill all the wives. The wives are responsible for all the wrongs.
Anyway, we'll be off next week for a holiday.
Next week is a Jewish holiday, Shavuot, so we won't be on. Many of our guests celebrate that holiday, but you deserve a vacation from the voice of wisdom. So we'll be back in 2 weeks, Wednesday, and I look forward to being with you. I'll miss you next week.
And just in case you think there won't be any aggravating topics 2 weeks from now, there will be.
Really? How do you know that?
All right. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. But in 2 weeks, we'll be able to talk about an interesting event, because within 2 weeks is the debate between...
No, I feel the debate's the 27th of June, so
It's after that.
Yeah, 1 week further.
What's the date in 2 weeks? Wednesday.
Let's see, the 20.
Not the 27th. Yet.
No, it's the 26th.
It's the day before.
Right. So maybe we'll talk about the preparation, what's going on up to that point. But yeah.
That should be interesting if they both show up.
Yep. Never know.
How much
you never
Trump
know.
will beat up on Biden because he destroyed Jeb Bush, who was the leader.
Although they're trying to, and I think wisely from Biden's point of view, because he knows how unhinged Trump can get in debates, that they're going to
take away the ability.
Like more, I don't know, pardon the expression, rules. I mean, like turning off the microphone when it's not your time to talk. They can do that, whether they will or not. I mean, if I were Biden, I would insist that these rules be followed. Or otherwise, I'd like, do that, but I think they may.
But Trump might bring his own microphone.
Or just scream. All right.
God bless you all. I love you. Love each other. Love your kids. Hug them, kiss them, and make sure you have a best friend that you would do anything for and he would do anything for you, because there's nothing more valuable than a best friend, particularly if the best friend could be your own soulmate, your husband or your wife. So love your kids, and don't worry about being rich. As I started the program, these are the richest guys and they committed suicide. I know several others I didn't tell you about. But the happiness comes not from money, but from your attitude and the way you deal with the challenges of life. It's not what happens to you, it's how you respond to what happens to you. That's going to define your ability to be happy. So be happy, don't worry, be happy, don't worry. And if you could afford it, it's within your price range, I think. Get a copy of Happiness Guaranteed or your misery back. You don't have to worry. If you don't like the book, you could throw it on the side and you'll get back to where you were, your misery back. I won't deprive you of anything that you had before. God bless you. Have a lovely every day of your life. Bye.